بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome back everyone to another lecture and this unpacking this great book of Islam, لب الأصول by Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari rahimahullah. So today we will take we are in book 7, the book of Ijtihad. We are going to take issues 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the issue 2 is about ijtihad not being negated by another ijtihad, which is very important because a lot of times people have difficulty understanding the possibility of plurality of positions. So we are advocating a plural. There are plural positions. There could be concurrently several correct answers because of the reasons that we are going to discuss. And then issue 3, we will talk about is it possible for Allah, for example, to tell the Prophet ﷺ, for someone to tell a scholar, rule with what you will as it is the truth, keeping in mind that a lot of ijtihad is based on dhann, not yaqeen, so that's an issue that he's going to talk about. Then issue number 4, he will talk about the issue of taqleed. So here we will introduce what does it mean to follow another person's ijtihad without knowing their dalil, which is basically the definition of taqleed. And as an extension of that, can you have taqleed in matters of theology, or is it only in matters of law? That's issue number 4. And then issue number 5, we will talk about what happens if a mujtahid, if there's a reoccurring incident and the mujtahid gives their opinion without proof, the necessity of looking for the proof, and what happens if you are in a repeat situation. Do you have to re-ask the mufti? What happens if the mufti dies, etc.? Those are the main topics, issues 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then what will remain are 2 issues, issues 6 and 7, which we'll do in tomorrow's lecture, which will conclude the section of ijtihad. And then in the final lecture, I'm going to give you an overview of the aqeedah and tasawwuf part of the book, which we are not going to talk about in the recorded classes, but certainly when we meet in our online sessions in the future, we can certainly go through that. So that's the game plan for today's lecture, and I gave you a rough sketch of what will happen in lecture 14 and lecture 15. We'll begin the discussion, inshallah, in the next clip. So we begin the way we normally begin, which is to turn directly to the text and say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. This is issue number 2. لا ينقض الحكم في الاجتهاديات لا ينقض الحكم في الاجتهاديات فإن خالف نصا أو إجماعا أو قياسا جليا أو حكم بخلاف اجتهاده أو بخلاف نص إمامه ولم يقلد غيره أو لم يجز نقد أو لم يجز نقد. Sorry, cut my tongue there. He says rahimahullah that the ijtihad of a mujtahid is not negated. If I engaged in ijtihad and then you engaged in ijtihad and your ijtihad could negate my ijtihad, then what would stop me from negating your ijtihad? And then it would be a cyclical type of situation in which we would never arrive at truth. So by reasons of logic, it is not logically sound that we would say that somebody's ijtihad negates another person's ijtihad, precisely because that is not what ijtihad is. Ijtihad is not that we are in the court and we are coming up with a hukum, we are coming up with a ruling of the qadi that will be implemented universally, unless I guess a superior court would overturn that or something like that. But if you went to the highest court, let's just forget about that example. Let's go to the highest, like constitutional supreme type of court of a country. This is not that situation where we are looking at the absolute determining right answer. That's not what ijtihad is, as we've been talking about. All of the usul units, including when we did the waraqat getting till now, the point of ijtihad is to exert all of your legal resources and your mind and all of that and your spiritual disposition to try to find the best answer. Allah, wallahu alam, and Allah knows best. So it's logically impossible for us to say that a person's ijtihad negates another person's ijtihad. I highlight this because the modern mind has a problem with this. The modern mind, as is informed by the predominant, postmodern paradigm, is forcing us that things are black or white. The things are binary. It's either right or wrong, black or white. You're either with me or against me. We hear this in politics. We hear this in the economy, in the marketplace. We hear this in sports teams. It is the polarization. That is not the way of Islam. So it's just assume there's no other way to say it. This is my ijtihad. Wallah, I believe I'm right. I could be wrong. That's your ijtihad. I believe you're wrong, but you could be right. That's the position. And that position we have is because we are all on the same team trying to follow what the Quran and the Sunnah tells us, keeping in mind that the Quran and Sunnah are limited in their amount of verses and hadith, but the situations that we face in life are not. So the way we understand the situation, the way we understand the Quran and Sunnah based on all the tools we've taken and putting those two together, which is essentially the process of ijtihad, summarized, will produce different results. And we celebrate those different results. So we celebrate that by saying the ijtihad of mujtahid is not negated. But there are circumstances, as he will come to say, in which they are negated. So he says, rahimahullah, but if the ijtihad violates a clear text, so maybe the mujtahid just wasn't aware of a clear text, or he just got so tunnel vision in his legal thinking or her legal thinking that they're not aware. Obviously, if they counter a clear text, the ijtihad is negated. Or if they go against consensus, which is why one of the conditions of a sound ijtihad is to know the issues of consensus, ijma', or an apparent analogy. In those examples, the ijtihad is negated. Not negated by another ijtihad, but negated because it has gone up against that which is absolute, which are those things that we talked about. Or if there are other instances, or if the mujtahid goes against his own school. So if I claim that I'm a Shafi'i, as we are in this college, and then I've done something that goes against what Imam Shafi'i said explicitly or implicitly by the other fuqaha or the murajihun of the madhab, then obviously my ijtihad is negated as being part of the Shafi'i madhab. Or if I go against the text of my Imam, so Imam Shafi'i says something, I just throw it out the window and I just say something else. I can't claim to be part of the school if I negate the Imam. And no one else followed this position, or his Imam stated its impermissibility to follow another position, it is negated. So those are some of the instances in which somebody's ijtihad could be negated. If they are doing absolute ijtihad and they go against consensus, a text, apparent analogy. When we talk about apparent analogy, just remember the example of alcohol and how it applies to all alcohol. The tahrim applies to all alcoholic drinks. I mean, you can't deny that. That's kind of foolproof. Not kind of. It is foolproof. A foolproof legal argument. If you go against something like that, your ijtihad is going to be negated. If you are inside the madhab, which is most likely the case, in my experience, most likely the case, people today that are doing ijtihad, they're inside the madhab, and you go against the parameters of the madhab or the text of the imam, or the imam says there's this position but we can't follow it for whatever reasons, there's an illah in it, then you can't, that ijtihad that leans against those things will be negated. And then he gives us an example. وَلَوْ نَكَحَ بِغَيْرِ وَلِيٍّ ثُمَّ تَغَيَّرَ اجْتِهَادُهُ أَوْ اجْتِهَادُ مُقَلِّدِهِ فَالْأَصَحُ تَحْرِيمُهَا. So, for example, if one conducted a marriage without a guardian, so for us, the wali is an integral part of the marriage. Of course, in the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, it's considered shartu kamal laysa shart sihha. So the hadith about not being able to be married except with a wali, no one denies that hadith. But for most of the madhabs, we say that's shartu sihha. That's a condition of its being a sound transaction. Imam Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu in his madhab say that's shartu kamal. It's just the full expression of the sunnah marriage is that there be a wali, but if a woman is old enough, she can, and not coerced, she can marry herself. So that's why I'm just giving you the background why he's saying it this way. So if one conducted a marriage without a guardian, so my ijtihad is that I don't need to have the guardian, and then I changed my ijtihad, or the ijtihad of the one who followed changed. One second. Yeah, so either I'm the mujtahid or I'm following another mujtahid, but the point of view is that the mujtahid's ijtihad changed. In the dominant opinion, the act is prohibited. Well, it's problematic, right? Because it's a marriage, so you kind of create a whole scenario. So this is a real example. I'm a Shafi'i, of course, as you know, but in the West, there are a lot of situations in which people convert, women convert, and they're older or something like that, and they want to get married. So we have to do taqleed of the madhab of Imam Abi Hanifa radiallahu anhu just because of the social circumstances. There's a lot of older women that are getting married, and there's no opposition from the parents, or the parents are not present, they're in another part of the country or something like that. So we have to do taqleed of Imam Abi Hanifa, which I do. Now imagine if Abi Hanifa radiallahu anhu was alive now and he said, no, I changed my opinion. Then that means he's saying in the dominant position then that nikah that I just did was batil, we would have to redo it with the correct situations. So this is a sub-issue under this issue that ijtihads can change. It's rare, I would say. I don't want to say statistically this is something that's common, but it can happen theoretically, and it has happened, I'm sure, in the past. ومن تغير اجتهاده أعلم المستفتى ليكف ولا ينقض معموله ولا يضمن المتلف إن تغير لا لقاطع. If a mujtahid changes their ijtihad, they must inform the one asking so they stop. If the issue is that is that I said something is permissible and it's not, I'm assuming that I'm the mujtahid here, which I'm not. Then you would have to inform the person that obviously my ijtihad changed, so stop what you're doing because I changed my opinion after further reflection. But if that person already acted, which is usually the case, because in my experience, when people come and ask me for a question, they've either already done it or they are really close to doing it, and they're just kind of clearing their conscience with me. So if the person already acted, then their act is not negated because they acted in good faith based on the previous understanding. And then the mujtahid is not responsible for damages if his ijtihad changes in an issue in which there are damages. Oh no, there's no damage in this issue, and then damages ensued. Well, my ijtihad was that there's no damages, so I'm not liable for those damages. Otherwise, there would be a problem in that situation, but not for absolute legal issues. So if there's an absolute legal issue or a clear-cut text, then the mufti would be liable. Okay, we'll pick up the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. Okay, now moving on to issue 3, he says, rahimahullah, it's short, so let me read the whole thing. المختار أنه يجوز أن يقال للنبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أو عالم احكم بما تشاء فهو حق ويكون مدركا شرعيا ويسمى التفويض وأنه لم يقع وأنه يجوز تعليق الأمر باختيار المأمور. The chosen opinion is that it is permissible to say to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Allah telling the Prophet sallallahu, or somebody telling a scholar, quote, rule with what you will as it is the truth, end of quote. And this is a proof that God's will is what the ijtihad produces and is considered a type of consigning, tafweed. And this did not happen to the Prophet sallallahu in the dominant opinion. It is permissible to say, do this if you wish. So the idea is the ijtihad of the mujtahid believes that this is as close an approximation of what Allah Ta'ala wants in this specific issue, but we do not say that absolutely. So the hukm al-shara'i, the sharia ruling, whether they are the sharia ruling codified in the books of fiqh or whether they are the sharia rulings that the mujtahid produces through the process of ijtihad, we don't say this is the hukm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this issue. We say this is what we believe is the hukm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this issue. Wallahu a'lam, and Allah ta'ala knows best. So it is possible that Allah ta'ala would tell the Prophet ﷺ that because he is guided by revelation and protected and infallible. The people that think that it happened or it would happen or did happen often, they would quote a hadith like the following from Bukhari: لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك عند كل صلاة. Were it not that it's too difficult for my community, I would have ordered them to do the miswak, the cleaning of their teeth at every prayer. So some people that the minority group, the minority's opinion will see this shows that what the Prophet ﷺ opines is the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To which we respond, no, he didn't command us to do that, so it's not. And this is called a tafweed, that one person would consign to another person the right to give that type of ruling. So it's possible, but it did not happen with the Prophet ﷺ. But one could say to the mujtahid, it is permissible to say, do this if you wish. Okay, so this issue is an issue of consigning. And then he says in issue 4, this is the issue of taqleed. So how long is this? This is also short, so let me read it. التقليد أخذ قول الغير من غير معرفة دليله ويلزم غير المجتهد في غير العقائد في الأصح ويحرم على الظان الحكم باجتهاده وكذا على المجتهد في الأصح. So he says rahimahullah, following another's ijtihad, taqleed, means to take another's opinion without knowing their proof. And in the dominant opinion, this is obligatory for the non-mujtahid in matters other than theology. It is impermissible to follow ijtihad only out of assumption. It is likewise impermissible for the mujtahid to follow another's opinion. So there are a few things in this one. Let's take them one by one. The first one is about the concept of taqleed. If you ask a mujtahid, whether alive or dead meaning you go to the books of Imam Shafi'i or something like that, and you see that Imam Shafi'i describes this is the way that you make wudu, and then you follow that way. And if I came to you and I said, well, why do you make wudu that way? And you say, well, Imam Shafi'i says that in this such and such book. And I say, well, why does Imam Shafi'i say that? And you don't know, then you are a muqallid. In other words, you don't know the dalil, you don't know the legal reasoning, the proof text, and the ratio legis behind those proof texts upon which and against which Imam Shafi'i leaned radiallahu anhu to produce the outcome of this is how you make wudu. Now, in this regard, most people are imitating and following. Most people are muqallideen. Most people will do taqleed simply because it is impossible for a regular non-trained person to know the adillah and know the legal reasoning of all of the issues. So somebody might know some of the legal issues and not know a lot of the other legal issues. If you know the legal issues, if you know the legal proofs of the imam, and you can understand that argument, then we say that that is your ijtihad matching the ijtihad of the imam. So that's a step higher. Because you have enough knowledge and enough background and enough training to understand the legal argument. I understand why Imam Shafi'i derived from this verse and this hadith and did not take from the other texts, the other proof texts about this issue. I understand that. So in a way, I am engaging in a form of ijtihad, but it just happens that my ijtihad matches the ijtihad of Imam Shafi'i. So, when in the books of fiqh and usul al-fiqh and whatnot, when we talk about al-muqallid, or when we talk about al-ammi, the general, the average Muslim, sometimes people think that this is a pejorative term. It's not pejorative, it's just most people are non-experts. They're just average Muslims in this regards. You can be an astrophysicist, Nobel laureate, Olympic athlete, gold medalist. You're still an ammi when it comes to this issue. So it's not pejorative in any way, shape, or form. And to do taqleed is a great thing. It's not something also itself not negative or pejorative. Not everyone can be original when it comes to this issue. Not everyone can be independent when it comes to this issue. If it was, then everyone would be a mujtahid and it would be easy. It's just simply not the case. So you are following, but you're following greatness. You are imitating, but you're imitating greatness. So if you imitate greatness, you yourself will become great. If you imitate that which is awesome, you will become awesome. If you imitate that which is amazing, you will become amazing. Because what is it that you're imitating? You're imitating the output, which is greatness. So I don't want people to understand this as a form of as a pejorative thing, a negative thing. It's simply a function of expertise and lack of expertise, and because fiqh is a very finite thing and very nuanced, it has its own terminology, and it takes time. I'm not saying it's impossible. It takes time. It takes at least, I would say, 2 years of really studying on a daily basis, several hours a day, to kind of to be a faqih, to be like, okay, I kind of understand what's going on. It's just natural. It's just normal. That's how it is. I can't read a book like learning a language. I can't read a book of French or French vocabulary or introductory book of French and then go right away and read the greatest books of French literature. I mean, it's impossible. I need a lot of practice. I need immersion. I might have to go to France or a French-speaking country and practice speaking French and stay there and take classes there and work there or something like that, to be able to say, okay, I can speak French fluently now, and I can read the books of literature or the books of philosophy written by the French philosophers, or so on and so forth. So it's the same type of thing. It's not impossible, but it takes time and dedication. So if you don't have that time and dedication, which in this case most Muslims do not have this, that's fine. They are going to imitate and follow the opinions of the greater imams that have that. Now, if, like I said, just to repeat, if you dig deep, like this is more for you guys, for students of the Sharia. If you are on your process to learning, and in the process of learning you understand the legal argument in great detail of a couple of things, that's good. That means you've risen above that level of taqleed. So following another person's ijtihad, taqleed, means to take another's opinion without knowing their proof. And in the dominant position, opinion is obligatory for the non-mujtahid in matters other than theology. So all non-experts have to follow a mujtahid imam, or else their deen is not, their act, their praxis, their act of Islam, their actions are not going to be sound, except in matters of theology. So we do not do taqleed in theology, as we discussed when we did the Jawharat al-Tawheed, because our theological belief is meant to be based on certainty, not doubt. If I follow somebody else's theological beliefs, that means I do not have certainty, even if that other person has arrived at their positions based on certainty, but I myself do not have certainty. And then if your faith itself is not based on certainty, well, it's going to be you're opening yourself up to really serious theological problems that could lead, may Allah Ta'ala protect us, to disbelief. So in issues of theology, we are not looking for ijtihad. I want to continue this discussion in the next clip, inshallah. So at the end of the last clip, I was just talking about this one line about we do not do taqleed in matters of theology. Of course, to be fair, this is an issue that is debated. There are some people that will say to a certain level or a certain extent it is permissible to do taqleed in ijtihad, but that's not the dominant position. The dominant position is that somebody's theological belief, I'm talking about theological belief, basic belief like La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. What does that mean? Just basic stuff. I'm not talking about the nuances, of having to know the asma al-salbiyya. That's more nuanced. The basic theology, you can't have that based on taqleed. You have to arrive at that yaqeen, that certainty yourself. Which is why aqidah, or very basic, simple down aqidah, would usually be one of the first things that students would study in a madrasa system. Of course, the more fuller expression of the theological beliefs, you have to learn it through the madhabs of the Ash'ari way or the Maturidi way. It's not necessarily taqleed, but you kind of have to go through that process of the structure laid out by the imams to arrive at a higher theological understanding. And then he says, it is impermissible to follow ijtihad out of assumption. Like in English we say, you can't wing it. Okay, so the mujtahid can't wing it. He or she really has to exert the effort and arrive at an internal certainty that this is the answer. Which is why, we are saying that a person's ijtihad cannot, in the previous issue, does not negate another person's ijtihad, because the mujtahid is arriving at what they believe is the most authentic answer based on sound legal reasoning. So they can't do it based on dhann. Even though the result is dhanni, okay? But their legal thinking can't be based on that type of assumption. And then it is likewise impermissible for the mujtahid to follow another's opinion, because he's a mujtahid. So if you've arrived at the level of ijtihad, it's haram to do taqleed. You can't be lazy, you have to do the ijtihad. Now, if you take the opinion that you can be a mujtahid in some things and not in many things, or some things and not in some things, then in the things that you're not a mujtahid, you can follow the laid down opinions. That's permissible. But for the sake of just making the class easy, let's just assume that we're talking about a mujtahid in everything. That mujtahid can't follow another person's ijtihad. They got to do the full work themselves. Okay, and then issue number 5, the last issue for today. It's not that long, so let me read it first. الأصح أنه لو تكررت واقعة لمجتهد لم يذكر الدليل وجب تجديد النظر، أو لعامي استفتى عالما وجب إعادة الاستفتاء ولو كان مقلد ميت. ولو كان مقلد ميت. نعم. In the dominant opinion, if an incident reoccurs for a mujtahid who do not, let me just read it all and then we'll go back to it piecemeal. In the dominant opinion, if an incident reoccurs for a mujtahid who did not mention the proof, he or she must re-examine the incident, or for a non-expert who asked a fatwa from a scholar, it is obligatory to re-ask for a fatwa even if the one asked for the fatwa, i.e. the scholar, has died. Okay, so this is about repeat issues, basically. The first one is a mujtahid gave an opinion on something without mentioning the proof. But then that issue is repeated. If that issue is repeated and people come back to him, then that he has to re-examine the legal issue and produce the proofs. What does that mean? Don't forget, we talked about a couple of classes ago about faqihun nafs, the jurist of the self, as I translated, that their being is ijtihad, their being is fiqh and usul and qawa'id, it's just a part of them. So oftentimes somebody will ask a mujtahid a question and they will intrinsically be able to give you the answer. That's okay if the person is qualified. But what's not okay is that they continually to rely on that. At some point they have to be able to re-examine and be like, this is the actual dalil, and here is the written page or 2 pages or half a page or whatever, how long it takes, legal argument, producing the answer with the correct legal way of writing and thinking to the question that you asked. So if it's repeated, at some point, as I said, the mujtahid is going to have to give the answer. They can't just leave it unanswered. So in the dominant opinion, if an incident reoccurs for a mujtahid who did not mention the proofs, meaning the first couple times, he or she must re-examine the incident and produce the proofs and articulate the proofs. Unfortunately, in some of the books of fiqh, in some madhabs, this is more common than others, we will have these inherited positions, and you don't know what the dalil is. And that's sort of what he's talking about. We don't want that. We don't want to inherit, there's a qawl in the madhab that says such and such, and we've just inherited generation after generation, and no one's really critiqued it, but then no one really knows where is it coming from. What is the dalil for that? That's the stuff that opens other schools to critique heavily. So the mujtahid will always want their best to articulate. Now, if those things are left for too long, as I just mentioned, they are interpreted or they are commented as being shadh. They are just aberrant positions that we can't follow. We still catalog them because in our tradition we don't edit anything out. We retain everything, even the things that are weak and forged and whatnot. But we'll just say, well, hada shadh. This is too aberrant to come. And why is it aberrant? Because somebody didn't do this work that he's mentioning here. Now for the mustafti. Now for the mustafti, istaf'ala, the person who asks for the fatwa. So the mustafti asked a fatwa from a mufti or from a scholar. I lost my place, 1 second. And it's a reoccurring issue. You have to go back and ask the mufti. Because maybe it's in your mind you think it's the same. incident. So you're like, well, khalas, the Mufti already gave me the answer. But the Mufti understood the waqa, or understood the situation, the real life situation differently. And actually what you're experiencing now is a little bit different than when you experienced last year. So you have to re-ask that to make sure that you are doing the right thing, even if that Mufti or that scholar has passed away. In which case, either you have to go to the books if they've documented it, or you'll have to ask another Mufti for that situation, in order to make sure that you have correct action. So the traffic between the general Muslim and the Mufti is something that is meant to be frequent there. And that's why the books of fatwa, the fatwa collections that we have, are really huge volumes. 30, 40, 50 volumes. Sometimes they're like ongoing. Now they're more institutionalized in national fatwa offices. And every couple of years they come up with new volumes, or there's like these international majalis of fiqh, and every time they gather they have discussions. So it's like a never-ending type of situation, which it can be overwhelming, I admit. But the reason why it's multi-voluminous, whereas the whole book of usul that we're doing is just, it's just this book. It's a pretty big book. I mean, it's like 800-900 pages, I think, in my. Let's see what the last page is. It's 790 in my edition. So it's a pretty big book. It's not a small book, but I mean, it's not like a 50-volume fatwa collection. So there's always the repeat, because each incident is like a new incident. You, as the average Muslim or the one asking, might think it's the same, but something might have changed. There might be a change in situation, of circumstance, of people. Imam al-Qarafi, he said there are 4 things, the 4 jihad that cause the hukm al-shara'i to change: time, place, people, and circumstance. So one of those 4 things might have changed. Even simply the passage of time, where you go from one region to another region. Well, in this region we don't do it. The urf here is not like the urf there. So the person has to continually ask, if it's a repeated incident, to make sure that their function is, their actions are correct. Now, you don't want to become OCD and like ask every little thing. Sometimes people also it can go the wrong way and have a problem. Here we are talking about issues that require fatwa, and we're not talking about issues that are well documented in the deen. Okay, so issue number 4 talked about taqleed, and why taqleed is important and why it's necessary. And then by extension, this issue number 5 is showing us the importance of exercising that taqleed, and that you have to interact with the mufti or the scholars to ask them these questions. Okay, we're going to put a pin in it here, and we'll leave issues 6 and 7, as I said in the introductory clip, for tomorrow's lecture. And then following that, I'll give you a summary of what are the parts of the book that we're not going to talk about. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, in today's class we were able to do issues 2, 3, 4, and 5 in book 7, the book of Ijtihad. In issue 2, we talked about that one person's ijtihad is not negated by another person's ijtihad, because it's a logical impossibility, or else everyone would just keep negating everyone's opinions. And then we said that there are some cases in which a mujtahid's ijtihad is negated. If they go against something that's firm, like a firm text, or a ijma', or a clear analogy, or if that's in the case if they are doing absolute ijtihad. If they are doing ijtihad within the confines of a madhab, if they go against the parameters of the madhab, the statement of the imam of the madhab, or they discard what the imam said, or the imam said you can't do this and then they did that, then those things would also cause the ijtihad to be negated. But they're not negated through another ijtihad, they're negated because they've gone up against something that you can't go up against, which is absolute. And then he gave us the example of the marriage without a guardian. If that was your ijtihad, but then your ijtihad changed, you have to catch the person so that they know that your opinion has changed. And if the person has acted on your old opinion, then there's no sin on them, because they acted in good faith at the time. Okay, and then in general, if your ijtihad changes, you have to inform people that it's changed. Issue number 3, we talked about the permissibility of saying rule with what you will as it is the truth, that it is theoretically possible, but it did not happen. That's the dominant opinion. But you can say, do this if you wish, or engage in this ijtihad if you wish, something like that. Issue number 4 dealt with the issue of taqleed. following another imam's opinions without knowing the legal reasoning behind it or the proofs. If you're following that imam and you do know the proofs, then we say that's not taqleed, but that's your ijtihad matching their ijtihad. And we also talked about the impermissibility of doing taqleed, imitation in matters of theology, and the reasons why. And then in issue number 5, we looked about reoccurring situations in which the mujtahid, if they didn't provide the proof in the first round, in the second or third round of the repeat issue, they have to provide the proof and document it, or else it will get discarded eventually through time. And likewise for the mustafti, the person asking for a fatwa, if the situation is reoccurring, they have to ask a second, third, fourth time for the reasons that we mentioned in the class. Those are the main topics that we talked about. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.